It is indeed a pleasure to be here in the midst of you, my brothers and sisters in Christ, to Moderator Creighton and his staff, to my friend, Sister Angela Campbell. I told her this. I said, I cannot let y'all out appreciate something that I get to see every Sunday morning. So hats off to Sister Campbell, to the ministers in this place, ministers and pastors, and to you, my fathers, children. There is a word from God. I don't know about anybody else, but I came here for a word. I did not drive an hour just to come and just have a good time, but I came to receive a word from the Lord. Amen. Just for a few moments, if I can grab your attention, I want to draw your attention to the book of Genesis chapter 32, a very familiar passage of scripture. And I want to deal with verses 22 through 30. That is Genesis chapter 32. Look at verses 22 through 30. Amen. Amen. Genesis chapter 32, verses 22 through 30. And it reads us thus. And it says, And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And they wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with man, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou doest ask after my name? And he blessed them there. Verse 30 says, And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. May God have a blessing to the hearers and doers of his holy and divine word. Just for a few moments on this afternoon, don't want to hold you too long. I just want to talk from the thought, it comes with a fight. It comes with a fight. Beloved, 10 years ago, that seems to me now so much time has now passed, that I was on my way as a freshman to play collegiate football. What's funny is that the whole process of transitioning from high school to collegiate sport is an event that all athletes seem to remember. What I remember is that the coach that came to recruit me for my area showed up in the lunchroom where I was eating my lunch. And he said, My name is Coach Weiser, and I'm with the University of the Cumberlands in Williamsburg, Kentucky. The first thing that I noticed wasn't that his name was Coach Weiser or what he was from the University of the Cumberlands. But what I noticed was on his right hand. And on that right hand was 2 championship football rings. Immediately when I saw the rings, I said, that is the place that I want to play ball. Because there's nothing better than being on a team that wins. After I saw the rings and I began to get excited, I quickly signed a letter of intent and said that I will vow my allegiance to the University of the Cumberlands to play 4 years of collegiate football. I showed up and They began to wine and dine me. They showed me all the areas. They showed me the field. They showed me my locker, and they even showed me a jersey with my name on it. I began to get excited, but then I wondered, is this too good to be true? He told me, he said, Donte, man, we got to have you on our team. We need you to play. We've seen film, and we need you on our defense. So I went home, signed my letter of intent, talked to mom, talked to dad, and said, this is the place that I want to play ball. And then came August. August comes in the middle of summer, and I find myself that the coaches that wined and dined me was also the same coaches that wined and dined every other recruit that came to that place. I began to, when I showed up on that first day, I noticed that there was 6 people in the same spot that I was promised. I said, Coach, I don't know if this is the very thing that you promised me. But he said, this spot is for you if you're willing to work. Second day of practice, we all got our jerseys, got our name on our helmet. And the first thing that he says that it is time for board drills. For all my football fans in here, this is what happens. You take one man that's sitting 6'2", probably 375 pounds, and then you take me looking at 5'8", weighing a good 250 pounds, and he says it's time to battle. My brothers and sisters, is that what I learned in that moment of my life is that I expected the promise, but I began to dread the process. My brothers and sisters here in this place, is that it seems that many of us, we want the blessings of God, but we don't want to pass through the bitterness and the burdens that it takes to get to the blessings. My brothers and sisters, that we want to receive the promises of God, but we don't want to go through the process that it takes to get there. We often expect the miracles of God, but don't want the mess that it takes to receive a miracle. We want God to get us to our, we want to receive the favor of God, but yet we don't want the fight of the faith. My brothers and sisters, it sounds like to us the very syndrome that I now have with my 2-year-old son. My 2-year-old son is now at the stage where that he loves ice cream, he loves cookies, and he loves cakes. But it becomes very difficult to get my son to eat when it's time for him to eat the vegetables. Even though as his daddy, I realize that the vegetables are more beneficial than the cookies and the cake. But it's the cookies and the cake that he wants rather than the greens. Let me help you, is that we often as children of God, we want the things to shout about, the things to give God glory, but yet we don't want to go through the suffering that gives us a reason to rejoice. What are you saying, preacher? Is that we have to understand is that when you take the sweetness of God, you also have to take the bitterness that comes with God. A songwriter said, he's sweet, I know. But if I be real and we have seasoned saints in the building, you have to realize that the same God that is sweet is also can be a bitter God. A God wondering why that you allow me to go what I'm going through. Why is it that you allow cancer to come and wreck my body? Why is it that you allow divorce to hit my home? Why is it that you allow my son or my daughter to go through addiction? But my brothers and sisters, I didn't come to shout you today, but I come to tell you that if you are going to have a dedicated service, if you're going to stand up and turn up, the issue is that you have to understand that it will come with a fight. My brothers and sisters, just being for real, this race that we call the Christian race is not for the faint of heart. My brothers and sisters, that on this race, that there are mountains to climb, that there will be valleys to crawl through, that there will be headache and heartache. But what I do know, as we see in the text, that if you'll just hang on in there, even in the midst of the hurt, that you'll find out that God's goodness is still present. My brothers and sisters, it comes with the fight. But to really understand chapter 32, I could just go through chapter 32 and get to, I ain't going to let you go till he bless me, but I can't do the text justice that way. But you must understand how the whole story unfolds. The whole story unfolds in Genesis chapter 25, and we begin to see that Jacob and Esau are in the womb of their mother. At that point in time, their mother received words from God. Chapter 25, verse 23 says, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people will be separated from your body. The one people will be stronger than the other people, and that the elder will serve the younger. But as you continue on in the story, we see that when they are born, your boy Esau comes out first. And when he comes out, they name him Esau because he's red and hairy. But right behind Esau, not seconds, but right behind Esau, holding on to his heel, is the one they call Jacob. Can I continue to move on through the text? Text says that even as they grow older, they begin to continue to have this epitome of sibling rivalry. What are you saying, preacher? Is that Esau found himself, he was a hunter, an outdoorsman, one that enjoyed being one with nature, but yet you have his younger brother inside the house, as I would call him a mama's boy. But yet one day, when Esau found himself in a vulnerable place, this hunter had been out hunting all day long, and he found himself at a moment of weakness. What that weakness was that he came in from the field hungry. Because if you're a hunter, you can only eat what you kill. My boy Esau didn't kill nothing that day, and he came in and he saw his brother, and his brother was fixing some Campbell soup. He saw his brother and he said, man, I don't know what you got in that bowl, but I tell you what, it sure enough smell real good. He said, can you give me what you got in the bowl? Jacob, being the trickster that he is, he says, I'll make you one condition. He says, if you'll give me your birthright, he says, I'll give you this soup. Let me say this, and I didn't come to preach this, is that you have to be careful of the blessings that God gives you that you neglect. Because if you won't appreciate the thing that God has given you, I guarantee you that somebody else will. Fast forward. Now that you find that Jacob and Esau, as they continue to grow older, their father Isaac is now on his deathbed, and he's getting ready to pass in his inheritance to the firstborn. The firstborn should be Esau. But yet in the kitchen, when the father Isaac makes that announcement, Rebekah, Jacob's mother, who saw Jacob as the child that didn't know wrong, the one that she said was her favorite, told him about the opportunity that his father has sent out his favorite son, Esau, and he said, I need you to fix me my favorite meal. So what happens, overhearing this, Rebekah grabbed some lamb out the refrigerator, threw that dude in the microwave, told Jacob, I need you to go outside, roll around in some dirt, put you a sweater on, and he says, I'm going to give it to you, and you're going to give it to your dad. So Jacob, the trickster, walks up to his dad. Dad says, Esau, is that you? Jacob said, yes, I am Esau. His father began to worry and said, I'm not, it sounds like Jacob, but feels like Esau. He says, come close, son, I need to smell you. And when he smelled like outside, he said, this is my boy. But then the text continues on, and what happens is that rather than Esau getting the inheritance, Jacob tricks his brother for the second time out of the very thing that he said that he wanted. The problem with Esau, and I'm not coming to preach this, is that Esau wanted the blessing, but didn't live a life that acted like he wanted the blessing of his father. What I'm saying is this, is that the life that you live will determine the blessings that you receive. I'll keep moving on. So once Esau comes in the house, finds out what Jacob did, he now says, if it's the last thing I do, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. He said, you're not getting ready to get me a third time. So what happens is that when he hears the threat of his life, his mom says, look, man, you done made your brother real mad, and he's coming to kill you. So what I suggest, that you go take off, I'm going to talk to your dad, and you're going to go find your wife with your Uncle Laban. Text continues to move on, is that while he's on his way to Laban's house, we're at chapter 28, what happens is that he finally has an encounter with God. His encounter with God is in the place where he saw the known Jacob's ladder, and he called that place Bethel because he received the promises that Abraham had. He said that everywhere your foot goes, he says that will be your territory. My brothers and sisters, it's so funny that we have the promises of God at our very access. But what Jacob didn't know, that in order to get the very promises of God, is that he was going to have to fight to get into new territory. So that brings us to chapter 32. What I've learned and what God said, he said, there are things that you're going to learn that comes with a fight. He said the first thing that you have to understand is that what comes from a fight, number one, is that there is strength in solitude. Verse 22 says, and he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had, and Jacob was left alone. Brothers and sisters, I have found out that in the society that we live in now, that most people are afraid of being alone. How you know it, preacher? It's because every person that I know, you either on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, some dating website, all because you're afraid of being alone. But I've also known that you can be alone and not be lonely. What Jacob had to realize is this, is that he was now at the place that he didn't have all that stuff around him. My brothers and sisters, I've learned that so many times, rather than being attached to the person that gave us our stuff, we are more attached to the blessing than we are the blessor. But it's when Jacob loses everything that he has, that it is sent over, he no longer has it, that he begins to get on track to gain everything. What I've learned is, a preacher said this, he says, you can have nothing, but yet have everything. He says, I'm at the point in my life that he says that I don't need more stuff. Jacob for so long has been so wrapped up in gaining stuff that he did not realize who God was. How do you know that? Preacher chapter 28 says that Jacob was in the place of God, but he yet did not know that God was there. Jacob was so wrapped up in gaining more stuff, so wrapped up that he tricked his brother twice, tricked his uncle once, and now he finds himself in the place that he says, well, I got all this stuff, and maybe if I give my brother more stuff, maybe that I'll appease him and get out of trouble. Let me say this. There's some things that money just don't buy. There is some trouble that is so deep that I don't care how well you paid, I don't care how much tithe you give, I don't care how much you serve, but there are some things that you can't give to get out of trouble. But what Jacob also had to learn that in the fight was not only the strength of solitude, but what Jacob had to learn was how to submit and surrender. Verse 24 says, and Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. As we later know in the text that this man isn't just a man, but he is now wrestling with God. But when I look at the text, I begin to ask the question, what type of God is it when God picks the fight with you? I said, God, how are you such a loving God, or such a merciful God, or such a caring God when you decide that you want to pick a fight with me? How is it that you are the one that I call way maker, that I call burden bearer, heavy load carrier, heart fixer, mind regulator, but yet you decide that you want to pick a fight with me? Brothers and sisters, I've learned this, is that there are times in our life that we are timid and we won't engage God. Jacob wanted the stuff of God, but he really didn't want a relationship with God because he thought the stuff was enough. But when you don't engage God, guess what? God will engage you. And God will use whatever is necessary to get your attention. If he has to use cancer to get your attention, that's what he'll use. If he has to use death in your family, that's what he'll use. If he'll have to use a bad report from the doctor, that is what he'll use. If he did not spare his own son because he loved us, I promise you that he would not spare trouble in your life to save your soul. But then I said, all right, that's why you picked the fight. But then the text says, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him. Y'all reading the same Bible that I am. I'm not. I know I'm reading King James Version. It says, the one that wrestled him. Talking about God Almighty. Text says, and when he saw that he prevailed not. I ain't got to be super deep, but when you look it up in the Hebrew, the Greek, in other words, at this point in time, God was losing the fight. I said, how in the world can a mighty God lose a fight against a mere man? He said, there's one thing that can stand toe to toe with God, and that's our own self-will. Because one thing that you have to understand, and this is Bible, he says, it's not my will for anybody to perish, but yet hell will be full. So if he won't make people choose him, he wasn't getting ready to make Jacob serve him. I have the privilege of living next door to a horse family. And one thing that I know is that when a new horse is brought into the farm, and you begin to want to take that horse and you want to put bits and a saddle on it, and it won't let you put the bit or the saddle on it, there is a word that is used to get horses to be able to follow the one who rides. And it's called breaking the horse. And what I'm saying is that if you act like you don't want to do God's will, guess what? He'll break you. If you act like you don't want to be dedicated to the Lord, guess what? He'll break you. If you don't want to live a life of righteousness, guess what? He'll break you. And guess what? Is that when he breaks you, he doesn't break you to harm you. He breaks you to heal you. Okay. So you're like, okay, how can a good God break his people? While I was in school, as I told you, I played 4 years at the University of Cumberland, but I didn't just play ball. I was also a student. And my major is in sports medicine. So one of the things that I had to study was kinesiology, and kinesiology deals with anatomy and physiology and deals with bones and muscles and ligaments. But one of the things that I had to learn when studying sports medicine was that what often happens when an athlete breaks a bone or has a fracture, what often happens is that if it's not properly treated, it's not going to grow the right way. And then because it doesn't grow the right way, what often happens is that there can be deformities of the limbs. But there's a term that I had to learn, and what that term is called, it's called fraction reduction. And one thing that you have to understand is that all good doctors, the first number one thing in ethics is called non-maleficence, which means do no harm. But a doctor who practices ethically will still have to re-break a bone that is broken to reset it to get it to grow right. Okay, what are you saying? So what you don't know, and I asked God, I said, God, why did you have to break Jacob? And he said, what you didn't know, because when you break a bone, they'll put the person on the x-ray machine, and it expose what's there. So I asked God, I said, why did you break Jacob? He says, well, when I exposed Jacob already had a previous fracture. I said, Lord, what was fractured with Jacob? He says his character was fractured. His integrity was fractured. He said his morals were fractured. And he said, if I didn't break him, he says where I needed him to go, because he is on the limb that the Christ is going to be on. And if I don't correct the limb that Christ is going to be on, that I'll have a deformed limb coming through the lineage of Christ. So I had to break Jacob to fix the old fracture so that Jacob's bone would grow straight. So when God breaks us, he breaks us gracefully. Tasha Kyle said that I'm gracefully broken. I'm broken with purpose. He doesn't just break me and leave me broken. He breaks me so that he can heal me. So I said, I've done said that what comes with the fight is that you have to learn the strength of solidarity. 2 was that you have to learn how to submit and surrender. But then one thing that happens in the fight, that the fight will show and strengthen. What are you saying, preacher? 26 says this, and he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what's your name? And he said, my name's Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and man, and has prevailed. Beloved, if we are going to get to the place that God has for us, the haunting reality is the thing that prevents us from getting to what's next for us ain't the devil, it ain't your neighbor, it's us. Let's be real. The very thing that we don't want to admit to is that some of us is our own worst enemy. And what the Lord did for Jacob after breaking him is that he's hanging on in the hurt, but he had to show Jacob who Jacob really was. I also work in addiction, work at a men's rehab. And one of the things that is the hardest thing to do when I get new clients is I can't help them until they realize they first have a problem. Up until this point, Jacob really didn't think he had a problem. Because if Jacob realized that there was something wrong with tricking people, he wouldn't have kept doing it. He tricked his brother once, said, sell me your birthright, when he could have said, man, there's plenty of food in the fridge in the house, man, you just pass me, I'm going there. He did it a second time when he knew that birthright should have belonged to his brother, but yet, when his daddy asked him his name, chapter 26, 27, he says, who is this? He said, my name is Esau. Then you move on and you continue to see the cycle that Jacob's in when he gets to Laban and he's getting ready to leave Laban's house. And what he does, he says, I'll take all the speckled sheep and all the speckled animals, knowing that the speckled animals was the best animals. But yet, he finally has an encounter with God, but yet doesn't change. Sound like some church people. So he continues on, and he finally gets to the place where God has his thumb on him. And he's finally in pressure because in the previous times in his life, he always tried to lie, try to steal, try to trick, try to deceive his way out of trouble. And he's finally in the place, and God says, what is your name? He says, my name is liar. My name is trickster. My name is deceiver. My name is manipulator. And if we would be honest in this place, we all got some names. But when Jacob finally came to terms with his old self, then God said, you are finally broken enough that I can use you. The Bible says that when you are weak, that's when you're strong. But notice what the text says. It says, and he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. I said, hold up, wait a minute. I said, you said earlier in this verse that you broke Jacob. He said, yeah. But yet, you say in this text, in verse 28, you said that he won. I said, hold up. How did Jacob lose, but yet still win? What's funny is that Jacob did lose, but Israel won. And what I'm saying is that the old you might be losing now, but eyes have not seen, nor ears have heard what God has in store for you. You might be an old trickster. You might be an old manipulator. You might be an old schemer, but you don't know what God has in store for you when he changes your name. What's funny is this, is that usually a name change usually means a character change. He went from Abraham, Sarah from Sarai, from Saul to Paul. But when in the Bible, Moses says, who are you? He says, I'm the God of Abraham. I'm the God of Isaac. He didn't say, I'm the God of Israel, but he says, I'm the God of Jacob. Is there anybody here in this place knowing that even when you messed up your name, God can still call you by your old name? Because when men says you fall, God says you prevailed. When men says you lose, God says you win. Still called him Jacob. But lastly, we get to verse 30. He says in verse 30, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. He says, for I've seen God face to face, and my life's been preserved. I told y'all that what comes with a fight is that there's strength in solitude. I also said that you have to learn how to surrender and submit. But I also said that God will often show you to strengthen you. But what Jacob said in verse 30, he says, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life has been preserved. So the last thing God said, he says, when you fight, he said, there's some fights that you won't come out winning. But he says there's some fights that you'll come out banged up, bruised up, and scarred up. But when you come out with a fight that is, you're banged up, bruised up, and scarred up, the main thing isn't that you lost the fight, but the main thing is that you survived. My brothers and my sisters, I'm out of here, but I just want to let somebody know that even when you fight, that my shout of this whole text isn't that Jacob received a blessing, but my shout in this text is that Jacob survived. I got a 2-year-old son sitting right here. About a few weeks ago, we was outside playing in the yard. We was running up and down the yard, and what happened, my son stubbed his toe. He ran to me and said, "Daddy, my toe is hurting." He had blood gushing all over the toe. But now, a few weeks later, there's a scab on that toe. Well, what's funny about my 2-year-old son is that when he takes off his shoes and his socks and that toe is exposed, he'll come down on the couch and say, "Daddy, toe." And I said, "Son, why do you keep saying about your toe?" He keeps saying that even though the pain is gone, that the wound is still there. My brothers and my sisters, I'm a man that's been in some fights. But one thing I've learned about fights is that when you get in a fight and you get wounded, bruised, banged up, and bruised up, you'll get a scar. But what the scar is just a receipt from the fight. My brothers and my sisters, I'm getting ready to get out of here. But when life gives you a fight, make sure you keep a receipt to remind you of where you've been. I'm almost out of here now. There was a mother of the church, and her name was Sister Sue. Sister Sue had a neighbor that didn't believe in the power of God. The neighbor went to Mr. Sue's house one day. She asked Miss Sue, "Why you do all that praying and singing?" Miss Sue said, "You don't know like I know what the Lord has done for me. Pick me up, turn me around, place my feet on solid ground." So the neighbor left Miss Sue's house, and then the neighbor came back later on that evening. The neighbor said, "Miss Sue, did you get wind that there's a storm blowing in?" She said, "If your God is so mighty, if your God is so powerful, why won't you pray that he prays the storm away?" Miss Sue said, "My God can do anything but fail." So the winds begin to blow, and the rains begin to pour, the thunder begin to roar, and the lightning begin to flash. The radio came on and told Miss Sue, "You ought to get to shelter." Miss Sue went down to her basement, began to pray that the Lord would keep her, and then she went to sleep. Then a knock on her door. "Miss Sue, are you in there? Miss Sue, are you in there? Miss Sue, are you in there?" Miss Sue said, "Yes, I'm still here." She came up, opened up the door. She opened up the door. Her house was blown off a foundation. All of her stuff was scattered in the yard. Her car was trashed. And her neighbor said, "Miss Sue, what do you think about the God you serve now?" She said, "Well, the Lord may have took my house, but he answered my prayer." She said, "Miss Sue, you ain't got nothing in your house." She said, "But the Lord answered my prayer." She said, "Miss Sue, you ain't got no bed to lie in." But Miss Sue said, "The Lord answered my prayer." She said, "Miss Sue, you ain't got no car." But Miss Sue said, "The Lord answered my prayer." She said, "I can't tell it." She said, "Miss Sue, what did you pray?" Miss Sue said, "I prayed that the Lord will keep me from day by day in a perfect and pure way. Oh, to be kept by Jesus." Is there anybody here can say they kept by Jesus? Is there anybody here said you've been in a fight, but when you look back over your life, you can say, "I survived"? Look your neighbor in the eye and say, "Neighbor, what you looking at is a survivor." Do I got any survivors in the house? Survive headache, survive heartache, survive heartbreak, survive bumps, survive bruises, survive cancer, survive distress. Is there anybody here say, "I'm a survivor"? The psalm said, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. If you've been good, say so. Wipe tears from your eyes, say so. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Is there anybody here gonna say so? My daddy always taught me, you better not be rude. And when somebody does something, you ought to say thank you. Anybody here want to say thank you? Lift up holy hands. Say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
What a word, what a word, what a word. We thank God for the message. We thank God for the messenger, for the gospel.